Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome to the Hearthstone Weekly Show. Now, for this week, we are going to be going over the metagame as a whole in terms of what decks are being really good, and what decks you should be aiming to play. And the main reason for this is that Season 2 is starting next week. And next week, I should imagine I'm going to be doing Naxxramas spoilers. With a guest, so I'm getting this weekly done now, so I can do the Naxxramas spoilers next week. As for the Hunter deck tech, yeah, the video file went completely kaput, so I'm gonna get it out this week, but I don't want it to interfere with the rest of my video making schedule, so I'm doing the weekly now. I'll do the tournament recap on Tuesday, and I'll do the Hunter video whenever I have time in the week, but I will get it up. I didn't get it up last time just because the video corrupted. I did put it up and something happened and just the file did something weird to the audio. So anyway, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? Now, for reference, I'm going to be using a second opinion on this because I do want to sort of express my opinion from an educated standpoint. So I'm also going to be using DKMR's meta report from iHeartU, and I'm going to be going over sort of what I disagree with, what I agree with, and whether I would change any classes, orders around, and talk about some of the actual decks themselves. As usual, I'll put the link to this particular report in the description below. Now, this is from DKMR, which is a very good professional level team that I have talked to a great deal, and they're really awesome guys. So it's great that they're putting out these kinds of articles that really help people. Now, starting on their list, they went with Rogue. Now, the Rogue thing, Miracle Rogue is particularly what they're talking about. Tempo Rogue is not amazing. I think I would agree Rogue is at the top. Miracle Rogue has been a dominant force for several weeks now, especially with the whole Hunter dying down. It's really weak to Hunter. It's not too good against Handlock, but it's really strong against some things like Warrior, for example, and it has pretty much exact 50% or better matchups against almost every single class, which is incredibly impressive. So I would agree Rogue is at the top, and I don't really see it coming down unless there's a massive meta change back to Hunter, which I wouldn't be too surprised by because the deck is far better than people seem to think it is. But anyway, Rogue pretty much standard at number 1. Most people would agree on this. Next, we're moving on to Warlock. Warlock fits into two categories: Zoo and Handlock. Handlock being the slow one with giants that gives them all taunt, and Zoo just being the flood the board and kill you as quickly as possible deck. Now, I do think Warlock is good, and it has becoming very popular recently, so I'm not surprised it's sort of this high up on the ranking. But some of the reasoning is a little odd. It talks a lot about the mirror match and also the changes, I suppose, what makes it good. Now, against Miracle Rogue, Handlock is a favorable matchup because you have a lot of taunt, a huge amount of taunt. The other thing it's very good against is Druid, because they need big game hunters to deal with giants, and there's a car alarm going on in the background. Okay. Anyway, so they have healing against Miracle, they have taunts against Miracle, and against Druid they just can't get past any of the big stuff, and Shadow Flame just wipes boards against pretty much every single deck. And then against Warrior, which has been falling off a bit, you've got Siphon Souls and just giants. So generally you're good against Warrior, Druid, Miracle Rogue. The only thing you're really weak to is Shaman, but then you're really strong against some of the top classes in the game, and as far as I'm concerned, that is enough to put your deck at the top. As for Zoo, I would say Zoo is a little bit lower on the tier list, probably about 4 to 5. Not second, because Zoo it's good, but it isn't that good compared to some of the other decks. It's consistent because it has so many low drops, but then the actual deck is not quite as powerful as some of the nut draws the other decks can get, so that's why it isn't quite as good. But I do think Handlock is definitely up there. Now, this is where I disagree a little bit with this particular list, which is the Shaman and Druid placement. I have been playing a lot of Shaman recently. I do think that, and I've been playing against a lot of Shaman recently, which makes Hunter better, actually. Hunter has been doing really well against Shamans, and I do think Hunter's going to come back in the metagame at some point just because of the metagame shift towards Miracle Rogue and Shamans. But Shaman is very, very good against Warlock. It can do well against Miracle Rogue, and it's very, very good against Druid. And I'm going to close the window. Busy street outside. Anyway, as for Shamans, I do think that the one problem they do have is the fact that they can't really go toe-to-toe with things curving all the time because of the overload. They're very, very efficiency dependent, and they have problems with card draw. Now, this can be rectified with Manatide Totem and with Gadgetzan. Mostly Gadgetzan. Manatide only usually draws one card. But the entire deck is driven around efficiency. However, on the opposite end of things, because of all the OTK combos they have access to, which is Alakir, Doomhammer, not really Leroy, but mostly Alakir and Doomhammer, it does, however, mean that you can play the efficiency game until you get them down to about 15 life and then just kill them. So, card advantage is not always a problem when playing Shaman. It's mostly the tempo lost from playing the powerful overload cards you actually need to survive. Things like Feral Spirits, Lightning Storm. And that's one of the reasons you play Unbound Elemental. You're forced to play these overload spells, you might as well make use out of them. Because a pumped up Unbound Elemental is very difficult to kill. Now, onto the Druid. Druid was very rampy. I think that it may be a little bit too low on this list. I do think Token Druid is a very powerful deck. Very, very powerful. A lot of my teammates have been playing actually, and Ramp Druid is not as good as it used to be because of all the Warlocks and Saps from Rogues and just Shaman, Earthshocking, and Hexing everything they play. So Ramp Druid has come down a lot. However, Token Druid I think is very, very powerful. It's fast enough to kill Miracle Rogues, and it's got the slow element to be aggro decks. So I do think that Druid is far, far more powerful than people are giving it credit for. Tokens especially can come up with massive amounts of damage in one turn, 22, 25 damage in one turn. It's absolutely insane. I do think that it's a little bit underplaced in this particular case. I mean, it is saying that it's largely on the back of Druid Tokens on this list, but I still think Tokens is slightly better than people giving it credit for. And we just need to see it win a couple more tournaments before people really start to take it as seriously as some of the other higher up decks. Now, the last 5 is the interesting bits that I want to actually go over, because these are the less played classes. The top 4, whether they're in the correct order or not is irrelevant. They're all pretty much at a similar level, with the exception of Miracle, I think is really, really high up. But they're all pretty much at the similar level. What I do disagree with, though, is the bottom 5. Warrior is one of the things I do agree with, though, being at, I think, number 5 in the list. Warrior is not that good anymore. It doesn't really have any favorable matchups in the current metagame. It's just kind of a solid deck. Doesn't have any favorable matchups, doesn't have any ability to gain advantage against some of the faster decks. It has issues with board wiping. And against some of the slow value decks, they just get out-greeded to death. I don't care if you have 45 health, I'm just going to slowly kill you. They're really weak against Shamans, really, really weak against Assassin's Blade, and Druid has always had a slight advantage against them, and Shaman has always had a slight advantage against them, because Shaman usually just deals with all the win conditions, and they literally can't win the game. So, Warrior, the reason it's fallen down is because the metagame has shifted to 4 different classes, which it's all bad against. It is bad against pretty much every single top tier class, so it's just fallen down. It's not good against any of the top tier classes anymore, and as a result, it just can't fly in the current metagame. So I would say give Warrior a bit of a rest and move on to some of the other classes, because it simply won't get the 60% or higher win percentage it was getting from last metagame from before the Unleash the Hounds nerf. This is mostly because while Hunter was a good matchup for Warrior, there were less Miracle Rogue and less Shamans, which are also good against Warrior. So it was just a better metagame in general for the Warrior. So I do think that Warrior has fallen down a bit, and it's a bit saddening for some players because they really did like the Warrior deck. I think Kit Kats and Dark Onyx in particular were playing a lot of Warrior and were sort of Warrior experts. And the deck just isn't as good as it was. We even had Dark Onyx on for some of the Naxxramas spoilers, and also for Unleash the Hounds, and he also said in that video Warrior just wasn't as good as it used to be. Now, the last four, Paladin. Paladin, I am going to be quite frank, I have no clue. I have not seen that many Paladins. I hope I see more Paladins, because I won't practice against Paladin. But I have literally seen 10 Paladins in the last 500 games. They are very rare. So rare to play against. There are very few Paladins walking around. So, I'm not really sure what to think about the Paladin. I would put it on the lower end of things, because Paladin aggro is generally just a worse version of Zoo. There's a couple of exceptions like True Silver Champion, but it's still just generally a worse version of Zoo. And Paladin control is not that good. I think Paladin used to be quite good because you didn't know what you were playing against when you went in. But then Warlock does a better job of it. Handlock is better than Paladin control, and aggro Paladin is worse than Zoo. So it's a bad Warlock, is the way I tend to look at it. It's a bad Warlock with some neat tricks like Divine Favor and Divine Shields in general. So I don't really like it. I mean, it's described here, it's a bit of a glass cannon, where it's really fun and quite powerful, but it just gets messed up and shattered by some decks. So I really don't like Paladin. I wouldn't put it as high as they have. I'd probably put it in bottom 2 until someone sort of breaks the class and manages to figure something out. It just doesn't seem strong enough to compete. Hunter. Now, Hunter is not as bad as people seem to think it is. I have been playing a lot of Hunter recently, and it really isn't as bad as it used to be. You don't really notice the changes that much. Unleash the Hounds, at least aggro Hunter. Sunshine Hunter is dead. Sunshine Hunter is dead and gone. I'm not going to argue with that. Sunshine Hunter is not going to work anymore. But aggro Hunter in particular, which is the one that punishes handlocks and shamans the most, and also Miracle Rogue, yeah, those are the top 3 out of 4 classes. And Hunter is favorable against all 3. That is the weird thing. I mean, actually no, with Warlock it's about 50-50. But with Shaman and Rogue, you're definitely got favorite matchups against them. And the only sort of lackluster matchup in the top 4 is Druid. And Druid is the least popular of the top 4, I would say. Druid is very powerful, but there's less actual Druid players around. So I would say Hunter should not be this low down. I'd probably put it where Warrior is right now. I wouldn't put it in the top 4, but I definitely put it above Warrior and Paladin by far. I do think that the deck is pretty powerful. It's not the best deck in the format, but it's definitely one you can catch people off guard with, especially now. They're not testing against Hunter, so you just destroy them sometimes. And it even says this is a great tournament deck because you just wreck metagames with it. Now, the last 2, Mage and Priest. Mage is pretty powerful, actually. The aggro deck is quite strong on ladder, and Duckwing Face has been playing a Mage deck. I think the entire Mana Grind EU team has been playing a Mage deck recently, and that's been really powerful. So, as far as I'm concerned, Mage is one of those classes which it's untested, but once people start to really break the class, I think it's going to be quite powerful. But at the moment, I'm not really going to make a comment on this because I haven't seen enough of the Mage. I'm going to have to watch a bit more of Dark 1X who's been playing it, and also Duckwing Face and Force End before I make my judgment as far as Mage goes. The last one on this list, which is one that I pretty much disagree with, is Priest. Priest has been the joke of Hearthstone for the past couple months, which has allowed several Priest players to be extremely successful, because no one cares about Priest anymore. I've got on Acebreakers, actually, we've got a Priest player called Mod Counter, and then you've got a Maz, and I think you got a Maz, and there's another one I'm forgetting. There's a third Priest player, third Priest professional player. Can't remember it. It'll come to me eventually. Whatever, moving on. Amaz is the most popular one, and he's like ranked number 4 in the world on Gosu Cup. So, yeah, don't underestimate Priest. Priest is actually a very good class. It's underestimated and it's underplayed, and I don't think it is the last one ever. Like, it's not the last deck on a metagame list, it's just underplayed. I would say that it is stronger than Paladin at least, and on a similar level as Mage, on sort of the untested and underplayed level as Mage, but even then, Priest has been more successful than Mage overall, just slightly less popular. So I really do disagree with sort of the lower end of this tier list. But as I said, as for the actual metagame itself, it's pretty accurate. So if you want a who's who of what you're going to be playing on ladder, this is more or less exactly correct. I would say Rogue is the most common, then, or in my testing actually Warlock was the most common because of Zoo, but it would be like Warlock, Zoo, Shaman, Druid. That is your entire metagame when you're laddering next season, and that's the major thing. Come up with a deck that is very, very good against these 4 classes. So things you could play are Shaman, which has favorable matchups against 2 and a 50% against 1, and then like a 50% against the other. So Shaman's a good deck to ladder with. Then we have Warlock is still a good one because your opponent mulligans differently depending on your deck. Hunter is going to be good because it's good against 3 of the top. Priest is going to be a little sketchy because you've got to deal with Miracle and Druid, which are not amazing for Priest. As for the lower end classes, Warrior would be abysmal. Don't ladder with this next season, it's not going to work. Paladin I don't know about. Mage I think is actually quite powerful. It has similar merits to Hunter, but I do need to see whether the deck is as good as the Hunter deck at least, or better. I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more, and I may end up doing a weekly show on that, see if there's like a King of the Hill or something playing the Mage deck, and I'll do that. And as for the Priest, I'm not a Priest expert. I never claimed to be a Priest expert. It's one of the few classes I've never really played extensively, the other one being Warrior. Those are the 2 classes I never really played at all. I played the other 7 classes pretty extensively, but I've never played those 2 classes to any serious degree. So I can't really say much on the Priest front, but I can ask around and sort of put it in my next weekly if I remember, just sort of say what I got from people about the Priest thing. And if there are any Priest players or Warrior players with any advice for people trying to try out those classes, put it in the comment section so other people can look at that, because I honestly don't know when it comes to the Priest and Warrior thing. They're not classes I usually play, although with Warrior I'm pretty sure it's not going to be as good as some people still think it is. But anyway, thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. This is a bit of a shorter video. It's something I'm trying to do the weeklies. I'm trying to make my content shorter in general. So the tournament recaps are trying to become about 10 minutes long. People prefer watching something that's like 10 minutes long with information in it. And as far as the weeklies goes, I'm going to try and keep them between about 20 to 40 minutes because hour-long weeklies are just insanely tedious to watch. With the one exception being major events. If I'm doing commentary on major matches and events, then it'll probably be about between half an hour and an hour. But as for just the standard weeklies, I'm going to try and keep it around 20 to 30 minutes, I would say. But anyway, as for now, this has been Jotto, signing off.